Hi everyone, over the weekend the media were jumping up and down about a major jobs announcement in County Westmeath in Mullingar by a company called Dovida. They were formerly known as Home Instead and are heavily involved in home caring for many people in Ireland that are struggling without proper care in their homes. And of course this is a private company, a multinational as well, with operations in many countries such as Switzerland, Netherlands, across into France and across the world in New Zealand and Australia, as well as here in Ireland. And their Chief Executive Officer is Shane Jennings, the ex-Ireland rugby player. And the announcement was made, of course, with a Fine Gael Minister for Enterprise in attendance, Peter Burke, the local TD, as they cut the ribbon to this job announcement of 1,500 jobs, or so they're claiming. Now, Peter Burke said this was a very positive development for communities right across our country. And this comes at the same time when, as I said, they look after over 8,000 clients currently, according to their CEO, Shane Jennings, and 4,000 members of staff. Now, at the same time, this comes when there is a loosening up of the work permit system. Isn't that interesting? Last year, 39,500 work permits were issued for Ireland. Of that, there was nearly 13 to 14,000 of those were for the medical sector, such as carers, nurses, doctors as well. And at the same time, we've seen the drive towards cheaper labour, essentially, across the economy. And this is important because over the last number of years, we've seen more people coming from various countries, such as Brazil, countries like India, working in the caring sector. Now, this is also important because they've loosened up the restrictions in terms of this. A number of months ago, they carried out what they call a labour market needs assessment. And this is what Micheál Martin's been talking on about over the last number of months in terms of loosening up the restrictions in terms of applying for work visas. And interestingly enough, over 1,000 of these visas are to be offered for the caring sector in the next period of time. So more cheap labour to make for these big multinational bosses as well. Now, what's interesting with this is that since the privatisation of care, and it is important because across the sector we see the health sector being privatised, and this is embedded and entrenched in the neoliberal agenda. There's been contracts handed out, for instance, through the HSE, through operators, private operators such as Dovida. Now, of course, they would probably charge maybe €30 per hour, perhaps, maybe higher, and would only give a small percentage of that, less than half, I'm sure, to their employees. Now, what's really important with this is that the outsourcing of the care sector and the outsourcing of our public health needs. Now, we've seen a drive through the private nursing homes with the for-profit providers, and in particular the bigger for-profit providers opening up all around the country, while at the same time smaller, more community-based and publicly funded as well nursing homes have been closing down. But of course the bigger guys get the big tax incentives, and of course it's because of budget constraints on not resourcing the proper public services, especially as our population gets older. And fundamentally it changes the working conditions for those workers, and it's more flexible working arrangements. And according to Peter Burke, they are looking for more students perhaps to work in this field. Now, a lot of student nurses, for instance, work part-time to make money in terms of trying to afford their rents as carers. And of course, they're under serious pressure in those jobs as well. Now, because we've seen society drive towards this model of privatisation of our care sector and our health sector, it's basically based on what jobs are done through the period of time that people spend with somebody they have to care for. Some jobs are limited down to even half an hour to spend with people, for instance, and it's based on what jobs they carry out, perhaps cleaning, perhaps showering, changing people, getting them up out of bed, getting them into bed, all this sort of stuff. And fundamentally, very little time is spent in terms of engaging with people and talking to them. And this is part of the atomisation of society. And at the sharpest end, we've seen the highest precedence of loneliness in Europe, where 20% of people said they feel lonely most of the time. Now, but this is fundamentally part of the approach and the neoliberal model of the care sector and fundamentally what the government have been driving towards over the past number of years. It's not just fundamentally about austerity and cutting down on public services, it's fundamentally about propping up the private sector by giving tax incentives to those big providers such as Dovida, as I said, a multinational making massive, massive profits and driving down workers' pay and conditions. And fundamentally, and at the back of it, it's really ultimately the people who need the care who are failed by the system. But this is fundamentally entrenched in the neoliberal project of the European Union, and in particular here in Ireland. So this jobs announcement was complete and utter spin, because fundamentally what it's all about is opening the door to more cheap labour and more exploitation. And at the same time, we've seen more and more people, in terms of the immigration chaos as well, more people added to this. So this is fundamentally entrenched in the globalist agenda also, while people are the ones to suffer. And when you consider that figure of over 20% of people in Ireland feel lonely, is it any wonder in terms of when people are based or valued in terms of their economic unit rather than, or value they give rather than the social value? And it fundamentally asks the question of society and what way society in particular has been driven towards the whole individualistic culture, where essentially people are more interested in seeing how much money they can make out of something in terms of the big corporations, rather than serving the basic needs and dignity and humanity of people who are suffering. And not to mention, the loneliness creates catastrophic impacts in terms of physical and mental health as well in society. But of course, it's all about the spin. It's all about the optics for this government, cutting a ribbon, while at the same time behind the spin we'll see exactly what's going on in Irish society, rather than having a basic health as a basic social good in society. But again, when does that matter to these politicians and the political classes and media classes in Irish society who won't talk about these issues at all? They just see a ribbon being cut and people will move on to the next story and say there's jobs coming for Ireland. At the same time, this government is talking about stopping the pension scheme in terms of the auto-enrolment, also slowing down any increase to the minuscule minimum wage as well, to boost the profits of those who are wealthy in Irish society. And at the same time, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of multi-millionaires in Ireland over the past half a decade or so. So from Dublin, thanks a lot for supporting my videos. Please share them also far and wide, and also at the same time, please subscribe to my channel also as well. So from Dublin, Slán, and thanks so much for all the support on my videos. Take care. Bye bye.